We have to have a Cappy background for the intro, and luckily for you guys, I got a special one today. So I actually took some family to the zoo yesterday, and I took this photo myself. These are some Cappies that I saw. I got a good photo of a red panda taking a drink. Anyway, without getting too far off topic, today I am going to be completing a trilogy. So we started out with what makes Ken strong, where I went over all the reasons Ken is such a good character in SF6. After that, it was why Akuma is the strongest, where I laid out my reasoning for what made, in my opinion, Akuma the best character in the game in Season 2. You guys may have noticed that there's still one Shoto left to cover, and today it's finally Ryu's turn to get put under the microscope. We did videos that started with what and why before, but today I'm gonna come at the Ryu video from a slightly different angle. Today's video is gonna be how Ryu became strong. So Ryu is kind of a unique case across the Shotos because unlike Ken and Akuma, he wasn't good on release. So here, for example, we've got, this is Brian F's end of Season 1 tier list, just to give you guys some reference. So the thing with Ryu is that he was not a top tier threat from day one. Most people had him somewhere between low and mid tier in Season 1. But the difference with Ryu is that ever since release, this character has been buffed heavily in almost every single balance patch for almost 2 years straight. And I think it's easy to forget how much he's changed in that time. So the plan today is I'm going to explain all of Ryu's major buffs since day one of Street Fighter 6. So you can see how much things have changed and how we got to the current iteration of Ryu, who I think has finally joined his Shoto brothers as a top tier threat. As always, please remember to subscribe and let's get on with the video. So, just to give you guys an idea if you weren't around for Season 1, Launch Ryu didn't really shine at anything. He was basically Ken, but worse in almost every way. The only real exceptions Ryu had were that he hit slightly harder than Ken, and his regular fireball was slightly better than Ken's. I think his EX fireball was actually worse than Ken's. There was no real reason to play Ryu competitively unless you just happened to really like the character. He was basically just a Ken downgrade. So with that being said, we've got to start this list somewhere. So I'm going to lead with what I think are the most important buffs Ryu has had over the last few years. And the first thing I want to talk about is Denjin Charge. This is Denjin Charge. And what this does, if you don't know, is this applies a buff to the next Hadoken, Hashogeki, level 1 or level 2. This is a very useful effect since it massively improves Ryu's combo potential. And it also massively improves his pressure. But on release, Denjin Charge had a massive downside. You basically couldn't zone at all while you had the charge. So the way that this thing worked in Season 1 was that anytime you did any of those specials, you would use up the charge. So anytime you did any version of Fireball, didn't matter which version you did, you would always consume the charge. And the same was also true of Hashogeki, right? And this meant that if you wanted to actually use the Denjin Charge on release, you basically had no zoning game. You couldn't throw fireballs because you would just immediately use up the charge, like that. So it was a huge decision that you had to make as a Ryu player. And you had to forfeit Oki a lot of the time after knockdowns just to get the charge up. And then once you forfeited Oki, you're back to neutral and you can't really fireball zone because you'll use up the charge. Not only that, but in Season 1, all versions of Hashogeki gave you the Denjin version, this thing. And if you guys don't know, Denjin Hashogeki did not have, and still does not have, different versions. So it didn't matter in Season 1 if you did light punch, medium punch, or heavy punch, you would only ever get this. You would always get the one version of Denjin Hashogeki, which in some ways was actually worse than regular Hashogeki, because this thing has one speed. And for example, you can't use it to frame trap off lights in Season 1. This was an interrupt. So yeah, so his frame traps off lights actively got worse in Season 1 if you had the Hashogeki buff. So his zoning was non-existent and you couldn't use light Hashogeki. Then, in Season 2, Every single one of those downsides that I just listed got completely removed. Every single one of them. So, no longer did Ryu have to make any trade-offs with the Denjin charge, because Capcom made it so that once you have the charge, you can still do the regular non-upgraded versions of the special with light and medium. So you can still do light punch fireball, medium punch fireball, light Hashogeki, and medium. And this whole time, you will still retain the Denjin charge for when you need it. You just get the charge up, and basically your next hit is going to do extremely high damage, while still being able to play his basic, like, neutral game at no downside. One thing Capcom did do is they made it possible to cancel this target combo into a Denjin charge, and that's +7 on hit. So especially in the corner, you now have a way to end combos, get the Denjin charge, and still have Oki afterwards. Like this, +7 point blank. Alright, so speaking of Hashogeki, let's talk about how this move became absolutely evil. So on release, Hashogeki wasn't a great move. You had a couple of uses for it, as you could use it as kind of like a fireball feint in neutral to bait your opponent like this. And it had a couple of uses in combos in Season 1. You could do, you know, some combos into Hashogeki. But outside of that, it was pretty bad. In the mini balance patch, near the end of Season 1, they made one huge change to the light punch version. So, on release, this move was -4 on block. It was unsafe, and you could not use it as a string ender. Capcom, in their infinite wisdom, they made this thing -3 on block. I mean, this single frame difference made this go from being a pretty bad move to like one of the best moves in the game, and that is because of how it interacts with jab strings. So one almost universal thing about Street Fighter 6 is that lights are minus on block. So you'll see like all of Ryu's jabs, all of these are minus on block, and that is universal across almost the whole cast. So the only like reliable way to pressure your opponent with lights is usually to do strings, like this kind of thing. Like if you string together like 2 or 3 lights, this kind of offsets the fact that they're negative on block because this is a chain, right? And you can frame trap your opponent by doing a string like this, but your turn basically ends after 3 lights in Street Fighter 6. Usually, if you do 3 lights, you're kind of at the end of your pressure string, and your opponent usually gets a turn. But one of the best things you can have in Street Fighter 6 is a special move that can frame trap your opponent after a light string. So I'll just show you a different example with a different character real quick. So here's an example with Bison of what I'm talking about, right? Bison can use his light scissors to continue his turn even after 3 lights. You get a counter hit here, and you can even get a combo off it. Right? That's pretty good, but the downside for a character like Bison is that this light scissors is unsafe. If they just block the whole string, Bison is -5, and most characters can punish from this distance. So it's kind of like, you get the 3 lights, but if you want to extend your turn, you have to take a risk and go for a move that's unsafe. And even still, this is a pretty good move for Bison. You can still get stray counter hits with this thing, even though it is punishable on block. Hashogeki, specifically the light version, just breaks the rules of jab strings in this game. It basically has all of the best possible properties of a jab string move. So, just like Bison, this thing will frame trap. So you can still frame trap with lights, just like Bison can. However, unlike Bison, this thing is also completely safe on block. So you're not taking a big risk even if they block the whole string. And on top of that, if you manage to catch your opponent mashing, and you get that counter hit Hashogeki, Ryu gets a fat combo out of this. And depending on how much resources you want to spend, you can do a ton of damage here. You know? 3,200 damage because your opponent tried to take their turn after a jab string. That's really good. So Light Hashogeki has the best of all possible worlds, where it frame traps from lights, it's safe on block. If it does interrupt your opponent, you get a full combo. And it costs no drive gauge whatsoever. You don't have to spend any EX or anything. So I can't think, honestly, of another move in the entire game that ticks all of those boxes simultaneously, right? And the other thing is, once you have established the threat of Light Hashogeki, you can then start to steal turns. So you'll see Ryu players use this as like a threatening frame trap, and then once they've established that threat, they'll start stealing turns and doing this. That's obviously not a real tick throw. There's a huge gap there. But because of the threat of Hashogeki, it makes his pressure a lot scarier to interrupt. Oh, also one other thing I forgot to mention. Making this thing safe on block also had the side effect of becoming +1 in burnout, giving Ryu a much needed improvement to his burnout pressure. Okay, so it's not just the light version of Hashogeki. I know I've been yapping a lot about light Hashogeki. One buff you probably forgot is that when they made the light version safe on block, they also completely deleted the pushback on block on the heavy version. So on release, heavy Hashogeki used to do tons of pushback. So even though this thing is +2 on block, it used to leave Ryu miles away. You used to be like here after a blocked Hashogeki. So even though you were plus, you couldn't really enforce a mix-up afterwards. And they pretty much wiped out 90% of the pushback on this thing near the end of Season 1. And now you're just pretty much always in throw range afterwards. Even if you do it from like a long-range stand heavy punch, you just get a tick throw here. So yeah, that's a good buff that I think people probably forgot about. Okay, next let's talk about Donkey Kick. This Donkey Kick is sort of the same story as Hashogeki, where on release, this thing was an okay-ish combo tool, and it could occasionally be used as like a semi-safe block string ender, but only if you spaced it well, right? That was how it was used on day one. Every single version of Donkey Kick on release was punishable on block. The heavy version specifically used to be -5, but as you may have just noticed, it's now -3. This move is now completely safe on block. And as well as that, Capcom in their infinite wisdom decided to increase its drive gauge damage. So if you ever block this thing, it does 1 whole bar of drive damage. So again, much like the light Hashogeki change, just by making this thing safe, this move became very spammable. Both like up close and just in neutral. Like a lot of Ryus now just throw this thing out from like this distance. It's very hard to whiff punish, has a really good hitbox, and it has about 800 active frames. It also has faster startup than it did on release. The current version of Donkey Kick, even heavy, is faster than it was on day one. Every version now does more damage than it did on day one, and every single version has more knockdown advantage than it did on day one. The EX version of Donkey Kick has also been buffed a bunch of times. This thing. This used to have really severe combo scaling, but it just doesn't scale like that anymore. In Season 1, the combo options of EX Donkey Kick were pretty limited, right? Basically, the combo in Season 1 was just going to DP, right? But they also buffed both Ryu's forward heavy kick and his back heavy kick, so now you can use both of those afterwards to give combo extensions. So you can do stuff like that now. It's honestly hard to isolate the insane amount of changes Ryu's had, because pretty much every combo, I'm going to have to mention buffs to every tool. So like, as an example, look at this combo right here. That, right? 3-hit combo. Now, every single part of that combo has been buffed since Season 1. So, in Season 1, EX Donkey Kick scaled harder. Forward Heavy Kick did not have enough juggle potential to add to the combo here. And finally, it was not possible in Season 1 to cancel Forward Heavy Kick into regular Tatsu. So all 3 parts of a simple combo like that are completely different to how they were on day 1. Anyway, the next thing on my list is one of my favorite normals of all time, Solar Plexus Strike. This is Ryu's forward heavy punch, this thing. This thing is absolutely evil in its current incarnation, but once again, on release, it was a very different story. This move was +1 on block. So you couldn't reliably tick throw afterwards. It was hard to pressure afterwards. Now, this thing is +3. As well as that, on day 1, this normal did not have much proximity guard. So if you were walking backwards in neutral, this thing could very easily whiff. It was hard for Ryu players to like lock your opponent down long enough to hit a move this slow. Once again, Capcom said Ryu is having to work too hard to land forward fierce, and they made it so that this thing now has unbelievable proximity guard, and if you try and walk backwards like this, it just glues you to the floor. You see how like Terry is walking back? The moment you press forward fierce, it just stops you moving. So it's very difficult now to misspace this move. Also, on day 1, you may have forgotten this one, forward heavy punch used to have combo scaling if it was the opening hit of a combo. So if you started a combo with forward fierce, this used to add a bunch of scaling. Capcom just completely removed that. They didn't even like tone it down to like less scaling. Now it just does not scale at all as a combo starter. So yeah, once again, forward heavy punch got almost all of its major weaknesses pretty much erased. And now it's one of the best pressure normals in the game. Okay, speaking of command normals, let's talk about Ryu's overhead forward medium punch. I think this is another one where it's easy to forget how different this normal is compared to how it was on day 1. But just to refresh your memory, this thing used to be -3 on block and +2 on hit. Now it's -1 on block, so 2 frames more block advantage, and +3 on hit, so 1 frame better. And both of those are really important changes because the block advantage buff means that Ryu's overhead is now one of the very small number of overheads in this game which can be plus on block as a meaty. So for example, in a meaty setup like this, Ryu's overhead is +1 on block. And if you guys don't know, generally in this game, even if you do the last active frame, most characters' overhead normals are like somewhere between 0, -1, -2. There are not a whole lot of characters who can be plus after a meaty overhead, but thanks to that buff, Ryu is one of them. And the other change I mentioned is that his overhead went from being +2 to +3 on hit. Like this, it's now +3, which means that on drive rush, this thing becomes +7. And that means that if you hit your opponent crouching, which you mostly will, he can now link into back heavy punch. There are almost no characters in this game that can do drive rush overhead into a heavy. It's hard to overstate how much this has buffed his overhead as a Oki tool and a mix-up from neutral. This is a quick comparison. I want to show you guys Ryu's max damage combo, assuming that you don't spend any extra drive. Let's just keep this simple. So, on day 1, this was Ryu's overhead combo. Ready? That. You did drive rush overhead, medium punch into DP. 2,320 damage. Now, under those same conditions, he gets this. Heavy donkey kick off back heavy punch into medium DP. Which, by the way, this is yet another thing he didn't have on release. Once again, every single part of this combo was not possible on day 1, okay? I just want to emphasize that. So, that link didn't exist on day 1. And also, heavy donkey kick into medium DP also didn't exist on day 1. Whole sections of his combo structure have just been added for free by Capcom. I guess we can't talk about damage output without moving on to one of the biggest offenders, Ryu's level 2 super. Now, specifically, the Denjin enhanced version of Ryu's level 2. So, I mentioned earlier how Ryu's Denjin charge is infinitely better now because you can choose not to use it when doing certain special moves. And this perfectly synergizes with Ryu's level 2 buffs. So the thing about Denjin level 2 is that this move has always done massive damage, right? Even on day 1, this thing hit like a truck. But the problem was there was almost no way of comboing into it. In actual matches in Season 1, basically the only way that you could land Denjin level 2 was off a stun, right? You would see this quite often in Season 1. That was pretty much the only way you could combo into this thing. You'd have to use it as like a combo starter to get the tumble state afterwards. It was really hard to combo into this thing. And it was a pretty niche move. The most recent balance patch, Season 3, completely flipped this situation upside down with a single change. I'm actually going to bring up the patch notes because I want to show you the actual text here. Because Capcom wrote it in such an innocuous way that you could have easily blinked and missed it. Change level 2 on hit effect to match level 3. So, what does that mean? The short version is, originally, if you wanted to get the tumble state after Denjin charge level 2, you had to charge this super for 38 frames. Over half a second of charging to get that effect. Do you know how long you have to charge it for now? It used to be 38. Chat, do you want to guess? How many frames? 12, 8, 22, 16, 18? The correct answer is 6. This used to be a 38 frame charge to get the upgrade. Now it's 6 frames. It's insane. This now means Ryu can now not only easily combo into his Denjin level 2, like that, he can combo into Denjin level 2 off mediums. Like, why can he do that off mediums? So, Ryu's damage output with just 2 bars of super can now significantly outperform some characters dumping full resources and level 3. Like, look at this nonsense. Let me show you like a high damage combo that Ryu can now do in Season 3. I mean, 6,694 damage, 4 bars of drive. I didn't even max out the drive gauge. I didn't burn myself out. And 2 bars of super. I mean, if you want to spend all 3 bars, you can also add a level 1 at the end. You know, you can also do that, which... 7,171. Why does he say this is everything I have when he has 1 bar of super left over? Is he stupid? The point being, the changes to his level 2 has made Denjin level 2 go from being an extremely situational move that you can only really land after stuns to now being a move that you can just like add to like any B&B. It's wild. Okay, what I'm gonna do next is gonna be a speedrun attempt. I'm gonna start a 1-minute timer and see if I can condense a bunch of Ryu buffs that I haven't already mentioned into a rapid fire list. So this is just all of the buffs that I don't think I have enough time to go over in detail. We're just gonna rapid fire them. It's gonna be a lightning round. 1-minute timer. Let's try it. 3, 2, 1. Hadouken has a smaller hurt box around Ryu's hands. All 3 versions all have 2 frames more advantage on block and 1 frame more on hit. Light, medium, and heavy all do 100 more damage than at launch. Odie does 200 more damage and is significantly more juggle friendly, including the Denjin version. Odie Hadouken travels faster. Light and medium Tatsu do 100 more damage, heavy does 200. Every version builds more super, more drive gauge, and has better juggle potential, both before and after connecting. Standing heavy punch went from +3 to +4 on hit, giving a link into crouch medium kick on punish counter. Crouching medium punch got more active frames and less recovery. Medium kick has an earlier cancel window, making him less vulnerable to DI interrupts. Ryu's level 1 super starts up faster, has a bigger hitbox, and travels faster. It can now also be performed while a fireball is still on the screen. Denjin Enhanced version has massively increased travel speed and 3 extra hits. Crouching light kick has 2 more frames of advantage. Forward heavy kick locks you in proximity block, so it's harder to avoid walking backwards. It also has more lower body invulnerable frames to hop over lows. Heavy Shoryuken gives more Oki on hit. I can't do it. I can't do it. I messed up. Alright. Standing, medium kick, and crouch heavy punch both build more super gauge and inflict more drive gauge damage on block. Level 3 does more damage if it doesn't trigger the full animation, and it gives better Oki on hit. Well, there you go, folks. I failed the speed run because I couldn't fit all of those Ryu buffs into 1 minute. God damn, that's a lot of improvements. I'll never get world record at this rate. So yeah, I guess to summarize, almost every single normal, special, and super that Ryu has is better now. Ryu's damage is higher, his zoning is better, he doesn't have to make compromises when going for Denjin charge, his pressure is better, he destroys your drive gauge on block, and he has to take less risks to run his game plan. Ryu today is basically unrecognizable compared to release Ryu. What a character, basically. Anyway, that is the Ryu episode done. The trilogy is complete. Let me know what you guys think of the current state of Street Fighter's main character, and I will see you all in the next video.